Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast, episode 30.
The big 3-0.
The big 3-0. You know, they say, what is it, 30 is the new 20?
Okay. Is that good, or is like at 20? I was like really weird. Like, yeah. I don't even know what was your job at 20?
I was a college student.
You didn't have a part-time job?
I worked in the Office of Financial Aid. I also worked as a doorman / pool attendant / maintenance man.
Did you say pool attendant?
I said pool attendant.
Pool. Okay.
Pool. Yep. Swimming pool, just to be more exact. Just so you don't. You played billiards?
Oh.
You played billiards? You hustled for money?
Hey.
No, yeah. So I was doing that, but my body felt good, though. That's the one thing. Your body starts to. I felt like at 30, stuff started to slide downhill. Now at 40, I sneeze wrong. It's donezo.
My back.
For about 4 days, it's just like it's done. I was like, oh man, why'd I sneeze like that?
Oh, I mean, it's just interesting to say 30 is the new 20, because like when I was 30, I felt so much better than I felt at 20. So I wouldn't want to go back to how I felt at 20. That's all I'm saying.
Well, at 30, you got married.
I did, yeah.
Like it felt better.
I mean,
the best thing that could happen in your life.
I would say that I'm referring to me as an individual. Like as a person, I felt like I was presenting the best person that I could once I was like 30.
Well, I think you were. I would agree to that. So much so, it's a great way to transition to our topic of today. 5 signs that you found your forever. So really, we want to get into what was that moment you knew you were ready to propose to this special someone in your life. And as we've heard Joy already say, she felt she was the best her, or on her way to her best self at 30. And I would tend to agree.
I mean, I was doing a random, remember that workout? It was like abs of steel, buns of steel. I was like straight up like doing those workouts. I think I had a 6-pack. I actually had a pretty good hairstyle. I like finally figured out my hair. I was just happier. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say that I'm not happy now. I just felt like I was just like not so anxious, worried.
Yeah.
You know?
6-pack?
Okay, let's get back into this title. Sounds you found your forever. That reminds me of Forever My Lady in a way. Is that what inspired this?
No, My Forever Came Today by the Jackson 5.
How does that song go? Okay.
I literally just played it in the car with the kids last week. My Forever Came Today.
Okay, yeah.
My forever came today when you walked into my life.
Oh, wow.
Made my life paradise.
Oh, is that?
It came today, forever came today. Yeah, it's a really upbeat song.
Oh, I felt that.
You should have. But really, you know, what's interesting about these shows, you know, we normally have prep meetings and we meet together. And today we both took naps.
I very willingly took a nap.
And we didn't have a chance to do our normal prep meeting, but I took some time to jot down some notes and shared with Joy on the car ride over. And I'm not going to say violently disagreed with this list, but I think this will be I think we're looking forward to this episode because I think this is the first time we're going to have active discourse on a list. So we're curious to see how this came out, and we did not have a guest to avoid the bloodshed, so we didn't get any blood on their shoes. So
with the guest, you're trying to be like, oh, I'm so witty, I'm so charismatic. Look, I care what you're actually saying.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, now we're just like us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's dive into this. 5 signs you found your forever. 5 signs that you're ready to propose. So number one, you find your partner interesting. And I think this one is really important because we were listening again to another podcast from the Gottman Institute.
It's called Small Things Often.
Small Things Often. And it's like, what is it, like 5 minute?
Yeah, it's like 3 minutes.
3 minutes, literally. Yeah. So we might adopt a similar format soon because I think it'd be something fun. But anyway, one of the points they made, when they they identified characteristics or traits of couples that were able to maintain long-term relationships. It wasn't about having things in common, right? Like common interest wasn't an indicator that a couple was going to last. It was when each person found their partner interesting, right? So that could range from anything from you find your partner's professional aspirations interesting, their personal aspirations like a six-pack and maintaining their buns of steel. Or even, some people, running a marathon or traveling to X amount of countries or it might be I'm going to mentor this many kids, whatever that might be. But you find it interesting. You think their background story, like where they went to college, their family background, their approach to life, like, oh, this person's always optimistic. This person used to be hardcore in the church, but they're not, but they're still grounded in their spirituality. I find that interesting. I find your sense of fashion interesting. I think, where you've been, the fact that you've moved around so much could be interesting to somebody. So any number of things you find interesting, right? The fact that Joy and I both like hip hop isn't enough to keep us connected, because a lot of people, millions, if not billions of people like hip hop or music or going to shows, right? So it's this notion that you're finding someone and everything about them interesting so much you don't want to let them get away.
Oh, that's kind of, the finding your partner interesting, just to give a little more background about the Gottman Institute, like they're like two people that were married once, got divorced, and then like married each other and stayed together a long time, and they just like studied why couples don't work out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so basically like they said the main reason that couples divorced or broke up was they didn't find each other interesting anymore. And that's not something that starts before you're married. That has to, like, that interesting component has to like last into forever. Like correct. Literally like, and you have to find the person interesting. But I think that what goes into that is the individual work. Because really, like, if you're like individually working on yourself, constantly trying to improve, like, you're gonna bring like new things to the table, which the person might be like, oh, they didn't used to do this, now they do this. Oh, this is interesting. Mm-hmm. Like, but if you're, and then there's also like an element of, because the only reason why I disagreed is like low key, like mad people be getting married super quick. They don't really know each other. They're still really infatuated with each other. And they think they found their forever or whatever. So that's the only reason why some of the stuff on the list, I was just like, I don't know, because it can waver. It can change. Like, to me, you could have mad stuff in common and not realize that all you have is things in common. You don't find the person interesting. Like, it's kind of a blurry line in a way, because finding someone interesting and having something in common can be interesting. And then you're just, you know what I mean? Like, if you have the same things in common, it's just like blurry.
I'm not quite following, to be honest.
I'm more saying, like, basically, like, it can be a blurry line, and I feel like that's why people do break up, because they don't even realize that they don't find the person interesting until it's like too late, because they've been doing either the same schedule, they're stable, or they have things in common.
Well, yeah. So yeah. I mean, I think you're agreeing with the point, right? Like, once you find that person interesting, it's time to get in to make that next step. I feel like it's easy to say, oh, she looks good, she's making money, I look good, I'm kind of sort of making money, we both like the same type of drinks or being on the scene, this should work. I don't see why it shouldn't work, right? Those are just things you have in common. Like the fact that she comes out and only drinks this type of drink and the background behind that drink, that, oh, you're an interesting person because you've taken the time to discover what drink that you like.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I think like what builds on, because if I was like a listener, I would be like, explain more, like what is interesting in a way, because it's when you gave the example of the drink, it's like, okay, the person does order this special drink, but you kind of know that you find the person interesting when you want to be like, why? Like, if
absolutely.
You're right, yeah, and you really want to know, that's like that's when you kind of like cross that line into like, oh, you find the person interesting, they intrigue you, they spark like a curiosity within you, whereas sometimes the commonality can be a little also superficial. Like, it can be like, to me, when the person is interested, like they have things that intrigue you when like nothing else is like around. Like, we both lived through a pandemic. To me, that's the biggest test of if you find somebody's ass interesting, because you was with them every day, every hour.
Yeah, I think that's the point, right? Like, you find them interesting, right? There's the superficial traits that you can basically get off of somebody's Facebook profile or a dating profile, right? That's not, like, you might be intrigued, but like once you've spent time, invested, time, energy, your resources into this person, and despite all that, you still find them interesting. Like, I think like a lot of people hold on to the idea or an ideal that someone could represent because of a social status or some superficial shit that's going on. But I feel like once you get into like the things that really make this person tick, you find that interesting. That's what you care about, because it's going to offset, right? It's very easy to fall in lust over someone that looks really good. The reality is 15 years later, they're not going to look the same. And that might not pique your interest in the same way, because your relationship was based off of that. But if I make like a lot of people, I think the trap a lot of people get into, they'll look at church, for example. Like, oh, we both go to church. Like, that's not interesting. Your perspective on the word and the gospel and how you apply it to your life, to me, that would be interesting and is going to make you compatible. But like both attending a building every Sunday at the same time, to me, isn't like a connection point or something a marriage can be built off of. That's why you see so many failed marriages that kind of derive from this, right? I think it's about, I said, like, for me, it's the profession, like, understand, like, oh, you want to do this for a living? Wow, like, it's not going to make a lot of money, but that's interesting to me. Oh, you personally, you want to run a marathon in 4 different cities? That's interesting to me. Oh, your family, man, like your granddaddy owned a liquor store and your mom came from this and battled through this and did this. That's interesting, right? I feel like the superficial side of it, once you realize, like, man, this person is boring as fuck, once we actually sit down, like, and actually have a real conversation, that's where the stuff, I feel, falls apart. Yeah. And I think, if you haven't like gotten past that superficial layer of what you found on a dating profile or on a Facebook or a LinkedIn page, it just don't work. Because if you can have that same level of closeness with a coworker, just because you're in the same room all day, every day, like, you both have this job in common, you both have similar career aspirations, but once you're not in each other's space anymore, like, oh, this person's no longer interesting because I left this job. They're still there. Like, why are they still there? Like, that's like, you no longer find that person interesting. You actually like something like, oh man, you still there? Like, type shit or whatever. Like, I've seen people come out, Colie, you still there? Like, yeah, of course I'm here, man. This is what I like to do. Like, you was on something else, but while we were together, it made sense. So I think, like, again, just taking the time to find the difference between common interests versus finding someone interesting. It's a fine line, and I think that's what you and I agree on. I think it just takes the time to dig it out before you get down on a knee and propose.
And I think my only like last thing that I'll say on this, especially if you're someone like listening and you're like, I need to know the answers, which we don't have, but I think ideally you should like make a list. Like, if you really want to know, like, write it out, like, think it through. Don't base it off of what everyone says is interesting. Yeah, we live in the social media age, and everyone thinks it's interesting to do the random TikTok dances or to have 10.1K followers or to have be at these restaurants or whatever, cool things. You got a GoPro, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like that, you can't make your list of what's interesting, what is trendy to the world or trendy. It's like, no, what's like interesting to you. Like, write it down, take the time to think about it, and then also when you write it down, like, do you fit some of this stuff? Because if you trying to attract somebody that's this damn interesting and you don't like do some of the stuff, it's like, what makes you think you gonna be interesting to them?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I can give an even more illustrative example. When my parents separated, my dad went to me and said, "What do you want to do?" So 10-year-old Colie said, I want to shoot bow and arrow, like just what a 10-year-old would say, random. So we found an archery range on the north side of Chicago, and every Wednesday and Friday, we would go to that archery range and shoot for 3 hours. We got good enough to the point where we were going to tournaments. My dad got good enough where he was going to tournaments in Vegas. My mom could give like two craps about actual archery, but the fact that this man asked his son what he wants to do, took an interest in what his son wants to do, we took the time to like learn that particular craft and become decent. I'm not saying we were great, but become decent at it, where we were like going to tournaments. You've seen the hardware that I have, right? So like actually won some of these tournaments. That was intriguing because he was in his 40s. He picked up something completely new. We were some of the only black people. Yeah, we were the only black people. And we like made our way into this world. We didn't have too many direct racist incidents. But my mom found that interesting that he could pick up something brand new, completely from left field, and start doing it. And I think that's part of the reason they got back together, because she was like, wait a minute, he didn't do any of this. Like, he just went home. He came home, worked and provided, slept, drank, slept again, then went to work, rinse and repeat, right? The fact that he picked up something completely new and did it with his son was something aside of him she never saw.
And it wasn't the money he was winning in Vegas for archery tournaments.
No, not at all. It was like, I mean, they started doing the tournaments once they got back together and they were going. Yeah, I get it. But the fact that this man that she thought she had known for 20 years, all of a sudden, like, when did you start shooting bow and arrows? Like, a month ago. Oh, okay. Well, when you start going to tournaments? Oh, well, I just started doing this, somebody suggested it. I started doing it. Well, you're bringing your son to? Yeah, we're doing this together. Like, she found that interesting. So it's not like we were making millions of dollars shooting bow and arrows, but it was just something like a facet. Like, it's almost like an interesting fact or tidbit. Like, holy shit, like Colie and like, oh, it's these two. You were the two black dudes they were talking about. Like, people found that interesting. It's like one of those things when you walk into start a new job or you're in a meeting, they do an icebreaker. Like, tell me an interesting fact. Well, I'm actually a decorated tournament archery shooter. Holy, like, some people will find that interesting, just the fact that I practiced twice, 3 hours a day, twice a week for like 5 years. Like, people find that interesting about somebody. When somebody decides to run a marathon, people won't find it interesting in running a marathon, but the fact that, like, wait a minute, you lost 60 pounds and you got in good enough shape to run a marathon. Wow, that's dedication. And the fact that you took your life in your own hands and you decided to make a change. I find that interesting. You're somebody that you can inspire me. People will find that interesting, right? The fact that somebody could be making $300,000, like, that's cool, but it's not interesting per se.
Yeah, and it's to me, what I find interesting is that, like, low key, when people do be having to say that fun fact or that interesting fact, like, they say something super boring and like not interesting. I'm just like, yo, like, that's all you could come up with. Like, I mean,
you went to dinner 3 nights last week. That's your interesting fact.
I like to watch TV. Like, yo, we all like to watch damn. Like, what are you talking about?
I've seen every episode of Alias with Jennifer Garner. Like, that's your interesting fact.
Oh, that you saw every episode of Alias.
You're stale ass. Like, no, like, that's why you're single. Like, stop being stale.
Like, but I'm just saying, like, dude, maybe your mom found your dad interesting because it was like he changed. He like worked on himself. He like became better in a way.
But I think you're making a separate point about self-improvement. I'm making point number one. You find your partner interesting. Like, I think this working on yourself, I think it's binary, but I think it's a separate point that we can dive into a little bit. But we're about almost 20 minutes in, and we got 4 more points to still get through. So I think point number 2 is pretty straightforward. For me, it does not feel scary, right? At some point, you're always going to be nervous. Like, to this day, you're nervous about how things are going to work out with your partner. I can get a new job offer, and I'm nervous on how my wife is going to respond. I find it could be scary, obviously, when you're in the baby making phase. She says, "Hey, we got to talk." Like, that could be like nerve wracking, but and having a kid is like. Having a kid is fucking scary when you haven't had one. Like, having the second one wasn't scary, but it's nervous, right? So there's a difference between being nervous and scary. But I think at some point you're actually excited about the future you're going to build. You're nervous about the unknown, but you're excited about the future. So to me, once you've been with this person long enough, you find them interesting and you can't imagine your life without them. Like, to me, the fear goes away, but the anxiety of the unknown remains. So to point number 2, it does not feel scary. Once you get to that point, it's time to drop down on one knee and ask that question.
I think the it does not feel scary might almost be like a male perspective of when you found the one, because to me it was super scary. I was scared. Like, well, one, like my background, I had been engaged before, so I wasn't like, I was scared. Like, oh man, like, am I gonna mess this up? Like, what's gonna happen? Like, I felt scared, but I feel like it was kind of like a good scared, because you're like, because in some situations, like, it's like that, when people say the story, like, do it afraid almost.
Mm-hmm.
And some, I feel like you might feel scared, but you want to still do it afraid. It's like that parable. I don't want to get biblical, but I just am randomly. But it's like the story when Jesus was like walking on the water,
Mm-hmm.
and then like they were scared to get out the boat and walk on the water with him. But then some of them at least like got out the boat and like started to actually walk on the water. Did they sink? Yeah, but they got out the boat. Like, they did it afraid. I feel like maybe for the guy, you don't feel afraid. For me, I did feel afraid. I was like, but I'm not gonna like let my fear stop me. Like, I want to do this with this person. Like, I want to proceed on.
Did you feel scared with me or with the first fiance, or both?
The first fiance, I was just like, I just want to be married.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to church super hard. I was like, he goes to God got us.
Yeah.
No, I'm like, oh shit.
But
no, I mean, I would say that with you, I was afraid. We had already dated in college once.
Mm-hmm.
My parents did get divorced. My dad didn't shoot no damn bow and arrows. They didn't get back together.
No, maybe we should have.
Yeah. And then, thirdly, I had been engaged. So it was just like scary. Like, I was scared, but I was willing, like when I was engaged before, when you think it's like the one, I had signs that it just like wasn't. Like, I didn't have any signs like, oh dang, like I kind of can't, like, I don't want to say you can't get out of it, but I didn't have any red flags, but I was still scared. Maybe I was scared of failing. Like, it might not have nothing to do even with the person you're with. You're just scared, like, of failing, messing it up, saying the wrong thing. I was scared that I would do something that would make you, like, leave, or I would do something that would make us, like, not stay together. So that was more like my own psychological.
Yeah, and I feel like, but I feel like for me, there's a difference between scary. I think scary is not only having anxiety, but you're walking into the unknown. The things you're talking about were all within your control, right? If not even trying to be shade, but like, I feel like the first engagement you had, I don't know if you actually found, going back to the first point, I don't know if you ever found him interesting, right? He checked off a lot of boxes, probably, right?
Yeah.
Probably handsome, went to church, comes from a family with means. Like, everybody wants that.
Yeah.
But then, did you find him interesting? And again, I'm not trying to get into
I don't even know what we had in common.
Exactly, right? So, of course, you're going to feel scared because deep down, you don't have that connection that you need, that connection of just finding them interesting, right? So, that's why I think ultimately, like, God had you and got you out of there. And had him as well and got him out of there because there was nothing there to kind of like make it go. I think the fear that you had there, like, you knew it though. You know what I'm saying with that one? I think with me, it was more like, I don't want to mess this up. This could go wrong, but that's just the unknown. So I feel there's a difference, but I feel like you're excited about being with me in the future, but like within that, shit can go wrong no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, you're excited to get any new job. Like, we're excited to record here at Levardigan Studios, but shit can go wrong. Like, you know what I'm saying? It has not, and we've done several episodes, so it's good now, right? So it's always scary. Like, first time you walk in, are they going to do all the stuff they're going to say? Like, absolutely, and then some, right? Yeah. So that's what's happened here at Levardigan Studios. But we record the Ain't Gonna Have Nobody podcast. But I feel like, you can imagine your future there, right? Like, at some point, like, it might be different for guys, but I could imagine us buying our first home together. I could imagine us having kids, going on vacations. Like, that's not scary. That's fun. That's something to look forward to. I think, again, was I anxious about what's going to be like being married? Yes. Am I anxious 10 years from now? Like, yes, about what tomorrow's going to be. But it's like I look forward to the future, what's going to happen. So I think there's a little bit of nuance between fear and the unknown.
Yeah, I maybe I see it different. I don't think fear is necessarily a negative emotion. Just like I don't think anger is a negative emotion. I think it gets a lot of negative attention, but sometimes, just think of the movie Inside Out. All those emotions had to be there in order for you to function as a human. Like, you have to have all those emotions. It's just how you choose to deal with it. I feel like I like the saying of do it afraid. Step out the boat. Like, put yourself out there. Like, that's how I feel it. So I know for me, I wasn't like, it doesn't feel scary. The fact that it felt scary actually was like, I think this might be the person, because I'm willing to risk it all. Like, I'm going to put myself out here for the person.
I hear you.
Even though, it could go wrong, I'm going to have like more of a positive outlook, overcome this, and like step out there with this person, like hand in hand, we're going to jump the broom hand in hand. That's like almost like you're jumping over like that fear that's there. Like, you're going to put yourself out there. Let's go. We'll work it out. Like, it's like that.
Absolutely. So again, point number 2, it does not feel scary, because we got 3 other good ones to go through. So it does not feel scary. That's just an important thing to think about. Like, when you're excited about the future, but nervous about the unknown, that's okay. You can move forward with that. When you just are scared, like, oh, I don't even know if this is the right person, and then you're scared about what's going to happen next, then you might want to like pump the brakes. So point number 3, and this one we talked about a little bit, but point number 3, you've battled through some tough things, but you're still excited about your future. So Joy and I went back and forth on this one. I think it's important at some point, obviously during the dating phase, you're going to have tough conversations, which in hindsight don't seem that tough, but you have those conversations, right? Like, at some point you have to talk about like your finances. How much debt are you bringing into this relationship? How did you accumulate said debt that you're bringing into this relationship? You have to have that conversation about, are you going to take my name once we get married? Because that, to me, that was one of my deal breakers. Like, it turned out you were happy to take my name, so that it didn't become a thing. Yeah. You talk about kids, how many kids you want to have. I think I definitely set a number before I had kids. Once kids came, I can't do that.
But I remembered the first number.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Like 28-year-old Colie versus 40-year-old Colie chasing around a 4-year-old. Different answer. But you also, you've also seen them when you're not at the best, right? I think the first night we really knew I knew you were the one. Is like, my grandma had just passed, and my grandma was my world. And I had lost, I didn't lose. I moved into a condo, and I never put the utilities in my name. So I got a good 5 months without paying a bill, and then they got me. And it happened to be the same weekend as my grandma's funeral, and I was like, what more could happen? And then Joy was like, well, we could just stay here. I jerry-rigged like an extension cord to the hallway light, and I was able to keep my refrigerator plugged in, and I had a single lamp that was able to light the house, and my gas was still on. So it worked out, but I was like, oh, you're going to ride with me like with this? And it turned out, for me, it was a fun, romantic weekend. I think she thought it was interesting. Like, how did you not put these utilities in your name for this long?
Yeah, I was like, talking about it does not feel scary. Get your ass to get this shit together.
Yeah, but that's low hanging fruit. All you got to do is call it. Hence why all utilities are in your name to this day. It just makes sense.
But in the scheme of it, I felt too with that story, I like said something. I wasn't like, oh, timid. Like, oh, I was just like, hey, you bet, like, you gotta correct this. Like, whereas in some relationships, you might not say anything. You might still like being like a superficial version of yourself because you don't want to make them upset. Yeah. You don't like.
You don't want to kick me when I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't trying to kick you.
No, I'm saying you don't want to do it, but you still had to say something. I'm agreeing.
Oh. Yeah, I think it's just important because in some situations, like in some relationships, y'all don't even get to tough. Like the person has such a wall up. That to me, that's a red flag. Like if you can't get to any tough topic, or they divert, or you never can like you bring it up and they're like, oh, we'll talk about this later. Like they have to want to hear you out with any tough topic, not just like the typical finances. Maybe something happened with their childhood. Maybe they have a baby mama or whatever it might be, but they should be able to like want to talk to you about it. And if they don't, it's like, what are y'all going to do when you're married? Like, it's going to be worse because way worse shit happened to us once we got married.
Absolutely.
Like, way worse.
Absolutely. Most of it's your fault, but yeah.
You got to be able to talk about it and like talk about it like repeatedly. And you got to be willing to talk about it, even if you know that when you bring that certain thing up, your partner is gonna get mad. You still gotta be brave. You gotta be brave enough and know it's gonna be okay. Like I'm gonna keep bringing this up till it's resolved. If you feel like you can't do that, that to me is like you should be worried. Like
absolutely. Because I think it comes down to some extent. This list could have been 36 things on. If you Google this topic, you'll see a list of 36 things. Which I thought some of them were dumb, but this list can go on and on, but it comes down to communication, right? At some point, you have to have the ability to communicate with your partner, and it's so generic, but I think you have to be able to like pull out like what are your neuroses, like what are the things that drive you, like, and the things that drive you crazy, and like where do your insecurities come from, right? Like if you're a product of divorce, you're going to have different insecurities than someone who's not. That just is what it is. If you're an only child, you're going to move differently than someone with several siblings. If you're a middle child, you're going to move differently than someone who is a baby child, right? So I think, those are very high level things. But if you understand somebody like, oh yeah, when I was 10, my dad lost his job and, he, his alcohol, was under control when he was working. But once he wasn't, he became a full-blown alcoholic. So at this point, I don't think Joy fully knew that yet, but once we diced in, that's like a huge thing that, we're still battling through, right? Because I'm a child of an alcoholic. So like the way I move, the way I express myself, the way I internalize is going to be different, right? So you're not going to know all that stuff on the upfront, but I think before you propose, you have to know some of these key things about someone's background. Yeah. I think understanding their family situation, like were their parents together? Did somebody, somebody might have came out the closet and the parents reacted badly to that. Somebody came out the closet and their parents were accepting, like all of these things, right? Like they're going to like, all these things are building blocks to the person you're going to get with. I have one of my very, very close frat brothers, he said if he ever get married again, like he cannot get married to a woman who didn't get raised by two parents. He was like, because you have too many times where you could, a single parent, you always hear it now, like you make your kid your boyfriend or you make your kid your best friend, like, by default, right? He was like, he thinks that's why his marriage fell apart because of that, right? So I think there's all these things in somebody's background and these tough things you have to tackle and battle through, or, like if you have to make some breakthroughs in order from get to point A to point B.
Yeah, that frat brother is like, eh? I mean, I think like that there's a deeper thing that he's more looking for than that. Because somebody could be with like two parents and like mad 2-parent households be mad unhappy. Like, and they, so I think it's like a deeper rooted issue besides that she didn't have a dad or she didn't.
I think he felt he married two people and he didn't sign up for the two people that he was marrying.
Oh, right? Okay.
And so, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, I mean, like, I get his blanket thing might sound harsh, but it's understanding the situation you're marrying into it's a tangent, and having that. Yeah, but just you have those tough conversations. So on his next relationship, he can at least explain to her, like, this is one of the reasons I love you. And people might be like, huh? But it makes a lot of sense when you hear him articulate it. And maybe he'll come on the show one day.
Yeah, and I think it's like really awesome. This point. At first, I hated this point, but now I actually like it because I think in some ways, too, you got to be willing to have the tough conversations about yourself. Like, if you can't have tough conversations about things, like maybe you're really type A or something and you're
Exactly.
super controlling, and you got to be able to say to the person like, yo, I'm type A, like I can't deal with this, and this, and not like cover that stuff up. Because
Yeah.
you have to battle, you have to be brave enough to like say the tough things about yourself too. And if you're hiding that from the person, or you're like being like, again, I was super churchy, and like the main thing they tell is that the wife should be submissive, submit to your husband, all of that. But if you're submitting to the point where you're like not you, or you're not like yourself, or like you're not representing who you actually are as a person, like I feel like that's not a good thing with the like sometimes you need to think like, is the person you're with your forever, but you got to kind of like reflect. I know I bring it always back to the person a lot, but I just think it's important to have like those tough thoughts about yourself and be able to bring it to the person, and then see how they receive you too. Because if you bring something tough like, yo, I'm at 30,000 in debt, and then the person just is an asshole to you, that's a sign too. You know, like you got to be able to bring the tough stuff to them.
That might be someone's non-negotiable. I don't want to marry someone with debt. That might, you know what I'm saying? That might be it. Somebody like, you know what? We'll figure it out. They might not care.
But that might be
But
better.
I think you have to, but it's come up, you work through it, you found a common ground, and then you move forward. And I think that's a good segue. And I think you'll want to spend time with this. So point number 4 is you can be yourself, right? I think being yourself is not about like, I can wear whatever I want, do whatever I want, and you just have to accept it. No, that's not the world. Like, there's a level of conformity that happens no matter what your situation, right? Restaurants, you have to have shoes and shirt to get service. Shoes and shirt to get service. So like with your partner though, like you can bring them all of like your insecurities, all the things that's happened in your past, all of your crazy aspirations, and they're not only going to be like okay with it, they're going to want to support it, because it goes back to point 1. They're going to find that shit interesting, right? Like being you, and when you do your, I do a lot of like air guitar, like just random stuff. It's like you might roll your eyes, but that's what Colie does. Like it's part of what he does, and I don't have to like wait and like not do it until no one's around. It's like, no, like, oh, this was good.
You mean like when we're in the grocery store and you yell my name extremely loud and hold up pineapples?
How else are you gonna know that I found a pineapple that are 2 for $3 and they're still like good if I don't do that? Exactly. But the real thing is you're not feeling judged, and in fact you feel like you having someone who's showing empathy to you. Like, you know what? Let's he's happy that he found this deal. I'm gonna let him do it.
I think too, like in the scheme of it, if somebody does do something like, I would never do that, if it's too many times when you're saying like, I would never do that, they should do this, they should do it my way, it's like you don't want your partner to become you. Like, it's like that goes into like finding the person interesting, like, but it's very tricky and hard not to realize like, oh, I'm trying to make this person me, so then this will be just so smooth sailing, but it's like they're not going to be interested anymore. Like, you'll find that it's not going to work out for you. Like, you just have to literally accept them for them. If they are messy or whatever, you have to accept, like, this probably is not going to change. Like, what's a problem we can, like, how can we solve this problem, not thinking the person is the problem, you know?
Yeah.
It's just interesting. It's not as easy as it seems. It really isn't.
Because you got a lot of people, like one of the biggest struggles I had, like you expect everyone to think like you and want to do like you. And then I think a lot of times early on in a relationship, things are done to placate. But the reality is that placation will go away. And you then have to figure out what it is, because that means someone's not being their authentic self, right? Like, I think that's for me, I think that's been one of the biggest struggles, like, 10 years in being married, just realizing the number of things that you did to kind of placate or just to avoid conflict, because we had like bigger fish to fry at that particular time. But 3 years in, like, oh, this bothers you? 4 years, this bothers you? 5 years, Colie, that bothers you? Like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a level of, if you find, I think the point I would like people to walk away with it, if you're spending a lot of time placating your partner, like, you're not in a place to propose. Like, if you know your partner's a type A and they've like beat you into submission and they can find a way to logically justify everything they want to do and you do it, don't move forward with it because it's not going to end out good. We've seen that. We've seen type A's pound type B's into the ground, and then the type B just is like, I'm going to slip out the back, and I'll see you later.
But I think, too, at the same time, the person who placates eventually just out of nowhere explodes. They just out of nowhere are like flipping the table, and the other person is just like, "What the hell?" Like,
but they were never themselves.
Yeah,
right?
they also never spoke up as well. So
Correct.
it's in a way you can't just give that person. It's like you should have said something, and then that to me that leads to more anger from the other side of it because it's like, why didn't you say something? I thought this was cool. Now you saying it now, and now it just leads to more conflict. Like I feel like if you should have your primary focus to try to be yourself around the person, especially if you think this might be your person, because in the end, either both people gonna be upset. The person who thought they were moving along smoothly and then found out the person was never cool with it, then they're not gonna trust you. They're gonna be like, well, are you just saying you're cool with this and you're really not? Like it comes with more like conflict to me.
It does, right?
Yeah.
I think the end of that, the way that conflict is resolved is a divorce. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's never really resolved because somebody's like, you know what, I have like placated to the point, I'm out. Or like you might be like, you know what, I don't know if you're telling the truth or not, I'm out. So I think you have to like take time, take the steps to understand, are you like placating somebody? Is this situation convenient for you? And then figure out from there, should you propose or should you accept a proposal, right? I think, you know, it's not easy to see, but I think, you know, no one told me that, like, hey, make sure Joy actually likes this. You know, even if she's saying yes, like, logically, could she possibly like doing X, or do you really like doing, you know what I'm saying? Like, people will do that. People, I love to go watch you shop for 3 hours. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that, you know?
Yeah, or it's just like sometimes people are just saying yes because the conflict of saying no is just like too much work. Like you don't want that to be like, become a habit because that means they really don't fuck with you like that.
Correct.
Yeah,
they're not
really
being themselves. They're not being themselves because they're like often sacrificing themselves for you, and it will hit a boiling point.
And when someone sacrifices themselves, or like a lot of women said, I lost myself when I had kids. I know I could say that, but you get angry.
Yeah.
Like out of nowhere, you're just like, I'm pissed because you're just like, I'm putting up with this stuff I never would have put up. And then your partner is just like, where is this aggression coming from? Like,
exactly.
It's like a lot of layers. Like it just doesn't end well.
It
I
doesn't.
can't say it any other way. It really
doesn't. It doesn't. You got to cut that shit off at the head. So
yeah.
So we're gonna jump into number 5. So, you know, I think for me a good sign is like your close circle is excited for you to be with this person, right? And I think it's a nuance here, right? There's one thing for people to be excited about you getting married. There's one thing for people to be excited about you being with this person because they know this person has the ability to make you happy, to make you a better person, to challenge you. They know that you find these things about this person interesting, right? I think a lot of times it's very easy for your parents to get excited to see their baby getting married, and they don't care who it is. Like, I don't care if he has 2 strikes and he just got out and he got to live with you until, you know, whatever. Like, they just, my baby got a man. That's all that matters. Whereas when I say it's your close circle, it's the people whose actual opinion you respect and want in your life. They're like, hey, that's a good look. Don't let this one get away. Because if you notice, like, you could date some of your friends, but how's it going with so and so, and that's the extent they care about. Versus like, hey, like how are things going with so and so? Is she good? Is she coming by? Like, then you got to make sure you're doing what you can to lock it down. So I think you gotta. Your circle knows, and you know, oftentimes they will be polite and not say anything bad, or sometimes they will because they could be haters, but if your circle is genuinely excited about you being with this person, it might be a good idea to get down on one knee.
Yeah, the only caveat because this was definitely like, oh, all my friends think you're great, I'm gonna marry him. I was engaged before. They thought it was great then. Mm-hmm. So for me, this was not one. But I would say, I think too, it comes down to who's in your circle, because
exactly.
that's just, but that's another whole podcast.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, if people are excited or like they like being around the person, I think that does help. Like, it does help, but it can't be your go-to reason because, again, some stuff looks picture perfect from the outside. Yeah. It literally does. So people are like excited, like, oh, this should work. Like, this is you know, so you just gotta, I think the person who should be the most excited is you. Not, if your friends are more excited than you are, to me, that's a red flag. Again, I was super churchy and all the, what's the term for the church? The church mothers or the saints?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
the
all the
ushers,
saints. Yeah.
Oh, the young, strong woman Christian for the Lord is getting married to the other Christ. I mean, everybody was turned up. I feel like we would be holding hands in the front of the altar like every Sunday. Like, no, that just because everybody's excited, that cannot be one of the main reasons.
Yeah, and none of these and we got a level set. None of these are in isolation. Like, for me, all 5 of these have to be checked. It's not just your friends are excited. It's just not that you can be yourself. You could be yourself with somebody, but you might not find them interesting, right? You could, you know what I'm saying? To me, it's about all 5 reasons, right? And I think we're going to wind down. But to me, 1, you have to find your partner interesting. 2, it can't be scary for you. It can't feel scary, right? You should be more excited about the future versus being scared about what can come or what can happen. 3, you've battled through some tough things and you made it out on the other end. So you have an idea of, you know what, we can communicate and resolve some conflict. 4, you can be yourself. That means you're not placating just to keep this person in your life or to keep them happy. And then finally, like, the people around you have seen all of these things come together and they're actually excited for you being with this person. They're not excited for you just to get married. They're excited about you being with this person and then getting married and being the mother of your children, right? Like, it's different between, everybody's going to be happy to go to a marriage and see somebody say, I do that day. But when your friends aren't excited that you're with this motherfucker right here, it's not good. And you can tell, like, they're not, like, actively inviting you and your girl to stuff. If they never invite you and your girl to stuff, but you still kick it, like, that's like kind of a yellow flag. Like, hey, if you have to ask, can I bring so-and-so? Like, yeah. Like, they're not excited for you. Like, they'll let you know, you know.
And the irony is that sometimes after it's over, everyone will be like, yeah, I don't think that was a good match. Like, sometimes people won't just straight up say it, but after the fact, they will. So
absolutely,
like, you always got to trust your gut.
Absolutely. So we're at time. We got to quickly wrap up with things we wish we would have known. So staying on the topic of this show, things we wish we would have known. I wish I would have known. For me, it's like point number 4. Like, a lot of times you don't often know yourself, but I feel like knowing that your partner at some point is going to placate you. I wish I would have known that, you know, your partner doesn't love everything that you love. Like, it can be too good to be true, because I feel some of the conflict that we've had in our marriage comes from either one of us just kind of going along with it, and then at one point, like, I don't want to sit up here and watch UFC fights every Saturday. Like, yeah, I'm cool to watch it every now and then, but I'm not like, I'm not gonna get an Anderson Silva t-shirt, like, fight kit.
He's good though.
Yeah, he is. But like, she'll watch UFC with me, like, if it's an event, but like, you're not gonna sit up every Saturday and watch like the commentary behind the UFC and what's going on. Like, you just want to see the main event and the few fighters that you like, and you'll do that when it makes sense. Like, I was like, got it. You know what I'm saying? So I wish I would have known that, like, hey, like, try to be in tune with when this person is being nice versus when this person is being nice to accommodate something you like versus just assuming and expecting for them to always fall your way. Like, it can lead to pain later.
And just to build off your point, I think as an individual, you also do have to be reflective. Like, is there something about me that they are placating? Because it's like, you don't want to be that person that people just don't want to say no to because it's like too much work. Yeah. Like that, I mean, it has to be some, like, you know, I think it goes both ways with the placating. It's a reason they placating you, and it's like probably because it's more work And it's just like, I don't want to get in this long debate about this. Like, all right, we just gonna watch these UFCs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to like throw you under the bus.
No, I get it.
I just feel like it's like a two-way street.
Yeah.
So I like that point. And I guess I'll just go into something I wish I would have known is that conflict is not a bad thing. Just like conflict is actually a good thing. Without conflict, depending on the type of conflict, I mean, if it's domestic abuse, like, I mean, that's like we go into, or even there's domestic, emotional, verbal abuse. I feel like that's like a different bucket. But I'm just saying, like, if you disagree or you have conflict or you aren't on the same page, I feel like conflict actually does lead to growth. Conflict is not something to avoid. It's something to work through together. And because I'm a child of divorce, and my parents used to argue like super hard. Like my parents used to argue like bad. So I just thought, oh shit, we arguing, like we might not, like arguing was like viewed for me as like scared. Like I was worried, concerned. Whereas and sometimes it's just like conflict. You guys are working through a problem. You don't have a problem with, just always remember, you're trying to fix the problem. Like, what's the saying?
You're trying to attack the problem, not each other.
You're trying to attack the problem, not each other. And if the type of conflict that you're having is attacking a problem, like that actually can lead to growth. And that's not something to avoid or silence. It's like conflict is not always a bad thing. Yeah. And it's going to come. Like, also, I used to think like, oh, if we have an argument, arguments meant your relationship wouldn't work out. No, it's inevitable. You're gonna have conflict.
Conflict leads to resolution, right? Destruction brings creation, right? It's the circle of life. In order to get to a solution, you have to have a problem. Like 2 plus, like you can't get 4 without 2 plus 2. Like 2 plus 2 is a problem. Equal signs in how many boxes your resolution, right? Like you have to have the problem in order to get the solution. So. Yeah. On that note, again, 5 things you should know before you get down on one knee. Like and subscribe, and come fuck with us.
Peace.
That's our show.